This video is all about cells and organelles. You have already learned about elements, which are the smallest unit of matter. We then talked about how a bunch of elements come together to form molecules. Specifically, if the molecules contain carbon, they are called organic molecules. When organic molecules come together in a particular way, they form cells. When cells come together, they form tissues. When tissues come together, they form organs. And finally, when organs come together, they form an organism. The video that we are discussing today is all about cells, how when organic molecules come together, they form cells. So what are cells? Cells are the smallest part of a living thing that are still considered alive. Cells make up all living things. Cells contain DNA. Cells can produce and use ATP. Cells can reproduce, meaning you can make more cells. Cells are very, very small. You need a microscope, which is in the background of this slide, to be able to see any cells. There are a variety of cells on Earth, but every single cell has 4 things in common. All cells have a plasma or a cell membrane. Those words are the same. Plasma membrane or cell membrane, they mean the exact same thing. All cells have cytoplasm. All cells have ribosomes, and all cells have DNA. You have to know these 4 things that are common throughout every single cell on Earth. If you take all the cells on Earth, you can divide them in 2 different types. One type of cell is called a prokaryotic cell. The other type of cell is called a eukaryotic cell. Prokaryotic cells are really, really small cells and are considered pretty simple in relation to eukaryotic cells. They do not have a nucleus. They do not have membrane-bound organelles. This question is always asked on my tests, is always asked on the MCAS. Do prokaryotic cells have a nucleus? Do they have membrane-bound organelle? No. No. That's how I remember it. Prokaryotic cells, no. They do not have a nucleus. They do not have membrane-bound organelles. An example of a prokaryotic cell would be bacteria. You've heard of bacteria before. E. coli, Salmonella. You probably heard of them in context of making you sick. Well, there are many good bacteria out there, but bacteria in general are called prokaryotic cells. Eukaryotic cells are much larger than prokaryotic cells and are more complex. They do have a nucleus. They do have many organelles. So notice in red, prokaryotic cells don't have a nucleus, don't have membrane-bound organelles, yet eukaryotic cells do. Examples of eukaryotic cells would be plants and animal cells. The way that you can remember this is eukaryotic cells is just like the word you. You are an animal, therefore you are a eukaryotic cell. Prokaryotes and eukaryotes can perform all the same functions. Eukaryotes just tend to be a little more efficient. I like to think of them as 2 different homes. Prokaryotes are like a studio apartment where the entire home is in one room. The bed, the kitchen, the TV, etc. are all together in one room. Eukaryotes are like a mansion. They have a few kitchens, maybe separate bathrooms. They have many bedrooms. They have many, many rooms. You can live in both of these houses. You can sleep, you can eat, you can relax in both of these houses. One just happens to be bigger and more complicated than the other. So, prokaryotes and eukaryotes pretty much do the exact same thing. They both are very successful types of cells. One just happens to be bigger and more complex than the other. One of the major differences between prokaryotes and eukaryotes is the presence of organelles. Remember, prokaryotes do not have membrane-bound organelles, yet eukaryotes do have membrane-bound organelles. They both are cells, they both have a plasma or a cell membrane, they both have cytoplasm, they both have ribosomes, and they both have DNA. You already wrote this down previously. Prokaryotes, remember, are really small, eukaryotes are larger, prokaryotes are simple, eukaryotes are more complex. Prokaryotes do not have a nucleus. Eukaryotes do have a nucleus. Prokaryotes do not have membrane-bound organelles. Eukaryotes do have organelles. Prokaryotes are bacteria, and eukaryotes are animals and plants. So notice under prokaryotes it says no organelles, but in eukaryotes there are organelles. Well, what are organelles? Organelles are small structures in the cell with specific functions. And remember, animal cells and plant cells, which are type of eukaryotes, have organelles. Do you see the picture on the left, the circular cell, and that big purple sphere in the middle? That purple sphere is a nucleus. That nucleus is only found in eukaryotic cells. So this is an animal cell, it has a nucleus. This is a plant cell, it also has a nucleus. That's the defining characteristic between eukaryotes and prokaryotes. Does it have a nucleus? If it does, it's a eukaryote. If it does not, it's a prokaryote. There are many organelles out there, but you are going to have to memorize 8 different types of organelles. The most important organelle that we just talked about is the nucleus. The nucleus contains DNA, which is the genetic information of the cell, and controls the cell. Cytoplasm is the fluid throughout the cell. It's like a jelly-like, water-like substance that contains, well, a bunch of water and some salts. The mitochondria is in every single eukaryotic cell. It performs cellular respiration, which takes glucose, breaks it down, and makes ATP, which is the energy of the cell. A lysosome is a really small sphere. There's actually a lot of lysosomes in the cell, and it contains a bunch of enzymes that break down any waste found within the cell. Ribosomes are very, very important. They are found in every single cell, including prokaryotic cells, and they make proteins. A vacuole is only found in a plant cell. So if there's ever a question about what's the difference between an animal cell and a plant cells have vacuoles. Vacuoles are large sacs that hold lots and lots of water. A cell wall. A cell wall is another difference between an animal cell and a plant cell. Only plant cells and bacteria have cell wall. The cell wall is a rigid outside border that prevents the cell from bursting. So if the cell gets filled with lots and lots of water, the cell won't burst because the cell wall is holding the shape of the cell. Finally, a chloroplast. A chloroplast is only found in plants. It performs photosynthesis. Here's a picture of an animal cell again. Notice the nucleus in the middle. It tells us it's a eukaryote. Here's 2 mitochondria. Here's a lysosome. It digests all of the waste. We have a couple other organelles that are important, but you don't actually need to know about them. This is a plant cell. You should be able to look at this and know it's a plant cell and not an animal cell. And the clues as to whether or not it's a plant or an animal cell is it contains a vacuole, which animals don't have. It contains chloroplasts, which are these green things that animals don't have. And it has a rigid cell wall on the outside. These 3 organelles would tell you it's a plant cell and not an animal cell. That's all I have for you in this video. Write down any questions you have and ask me in class.